Thank you for joining today's webinar for the NASA TechLeap Prize Universal Payload Interface Challenge, also known as UPIC. My name is Christabel Villeta, and I'm with CARET. We are the agency that is supporting NASA with the design and management of this challenge. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the News and Updates page of the challenge website in the next week. We'll also email it to those who have registered for the challenge. So we've reserved the majority of our time over the next hour for your questions. In just a moment, Joe Zemo from the NASA Flight Opportunities team will welcome you and provide an overview of UPIC. I'll do a quick walkthrough of the challenge website with assistance from my CARET colleague, Ethan Matthews. Then Amy Klein and the NASA TechLeap Prize team will help get your questions answered. As your questions come up today, please type them into the Q&A tab, and we'll answer as many as we can during our session today. If you have comments or questions that is meant for directly for the NASA TechLeap Prize team, please email us at questions@nasatechleap.org. Before we move on, some very important dates to keep in mind. The deadline to register for the Universal Payload Interface Challenge is Thursday, February 1 at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Please note that you must register in order to submit an application. Please also save the date of Thursday, February 8 at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Time for our second Q&A webinar. This will be for registrants of the challenge only. The link to sign up for that webinar will be sent to registrants in the coming weeks. And then the application deadline is Thursday, February 22nd at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, if you have comments for the UPIC team and questions after today's session, please don't hesitate to reach us at questions@nasatechleap.org. Now, I'm very pleased to turn things over to Joe Zemo with the NASA Flight Opportunities team.
Hi, everyone. If you wouldn't mind pulling up the intro deck there. Just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for joining and taking the time out of your day to interface with us. My name is Joe Zemo, and I work for the NASA Flight Opportunities Program. And we're sponsoring this third challenge as part of the NASA TechLeap Prize. This challenge is a competition focused on reducing the cost and complexity of payload integration through an optimized interface system or system of systems. And the Flight Opportunities Program, along with the Small Spacecraft Technology Office, have a portfolio of projects that seek to change the pace of space exploration, discovery, and commerce through utilization of commercial providers to test capabilities and technologies that are critical for missions that NASA and the nation are pursuing. We're always looking for ways to move faster. Being able to test these technologies as quickly as possible is very important for this whole picture to work. For a little bit of context on how Flight Opportunities got involved with this challenge and came up with the idea for this challenge, if you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide. We deal with a lot of interfaces across a lot of different flight vehicles. We deal with suborbital vehicles, such as rocket-powered vehicles, like sounding rockets or high-altitude balloons, and vertical takeoff, vertical landing vehicles. But we also deal with orbital platforms, such as hosted orbital platforms for destinations like low Earth orbit, the Moon, and even Mars. And what are we putting on these vehicles is a good question. So if you go to the next slide, we work with a lot of innovators across industry, academia, and government, who all have payloads across a wide array of focus areas, such as the ones you can see here, like cryogenic fluid management, thermal protection systems, and in situ resource utilization. There's a lot of different types of interfaces and a lot of different types of flight vehicles. And so when developing your UPIC solutions, it's good to keep in mind the types of innovators who might most benefit from an easy way to get their payloads onto one or multiple flight vehicles. As a hint, the use cases outlined in the technical guidelines of this challenge are a good place to start and find out exactly what kinds of places the UPIC system might be ideally used. And in summary, we're really excited to see the kinds of solutions that come out of this challenge and how it might positively impact payload flights for all of these innovators. And yeah, with that said, I think we are just about ready to move into questions. I'll turn it back over to Christabel.
Thank you so much, Joe. Before we open up for questions, I do want to walk through the website quickly, just to give an overview of the process, and we'll start with how to register. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to complete the registration process as soon as possible. Again, registration by 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on February 1 is required in order for you to access and submit an online application. Registration is very simple. You'll go to the upper right-hand corner of any page on the website, click on the button that counts down the number of days to register. You'll be instructed to create and confirm an account, and then prompted to submit some basic information about yourself and your organization to help us better understand our registrant community. Please note, you will not receive an email confirmation of your registration. If you are able to access the online application form and the forums on the platform, then you have registered properly for the challenge. And again, if you have any issues, please do email us. Now, so all of our challenges are rooted in the values of openness, transparency, and fairness. We want to make sure that everyone who registers and applies for this opportunity knows exactly what we expect from them, when and how they're going to be scored, and who will be evaluating their solutions. This website is built as an instructional guide to understanding that process. A good place to start is the application process. The full text of the application is available for any visitor to the site. You can see all of the questions, prompts, requirements, and word count limits. You can scroll through. You're strongly encouraged to read through the entire application. We also provide the technical guidelines so that you can have a good grasp of what is required in order to submit a competitive application. The technical guidelines provide a summary of the problem we are solving for, key objectives of the challenge, a list of minimum required capabilities, sample scenarios, descriptions of each phase for winners, and more. Once you've reviewed these pages, you should have a very strong sense of what you'll need to do to apply. The next question we typically get is, how will the applications be evaluated? On the challenge website, you can go to the scoring process and select scoring rubric to review the tool that the evaluation panel will use to score and comment on their assigned applications. Our criteria are relevant, verifiable, achievable, and feasible for flight. Each trait has prompts that detail what each trait means in this context, and each trait will be given a score between 0 and 5. You can toggle back and forth between the scoring ranges for any given trait, and a scoring range definition will appear to provide further detail on what a low versus a high score might mean for the Universal Payload Interface Challenge. This rubric defines what makes a strong application, and we encourage you to familiarize yourself with it. Also under scoring process, you can view criteria for each round of system build and the performance incentive phase. Please spend some time looking at all of these pages to prepare you for your submission. And then this brings us to the actual scoring process. Following the submission deadline, all eligible applications will move into evaluation panel review. You can see the list of confirmed judges on our website. And not only will you receive scores on your application from 5 of these judges, but you'll also get feedback. Each judge is required to provide comments to justify their scores and note their overall impression of each application they're assigned. We often find that the feedback provided by these judges is one of the most important aspects of participating in our challenges. And that even if you're not selected as a winner, you walk away with valuable feedback that you can then use to refine your solutions and perhaps seek other partnerships, funding, and support. This brings us to another common question we receive: how do we ensure the process is fair? So to address this question, you can go to the menu and click on Fairness. And this is a web page dedicated specifically to explaining how we normalize scores. As I mentioned earlier, every valid application will be scored by 5 members of our evaluation panel. This means that every judge will not look at every application. We make sure that you're not at disadvantage just by chance you were assigned to a hard grader and another applicant was reviewed by a judge who tended to be a little more lenient. On this page, you can read more about how scores are rescaled and normalized to account for this. A few other items. There are 2 other features on the website I'd like to point out. First, we can go to the rules page. Here you can read about the legal stipulations governing your participation. You can find the eligibility criteria, and you can learn more about the detailed terms and conditions. Finally, we have a timeline page that details each phase of the challenge. And here you'll see the deadlines, registration, submission deadline on February 22nd, and the timeline goes on to list all other key dates related to the challenge. Our website also includes other helpful areas that will be updated periodically throughout this process. This includes news and updates and a series of frequently asked questions. We encourage you to read over all of it to prepare you for submitting your application. And now let's move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. Please continue to add your questions to the Q&A tab, and we'll get to as many as possible today. Please note that to ensure fairness, we are not able to provide guidance that is very specific to your proposed solution. For questions like that, you can email us at questions@nasatechleap.org. All right, I'll turn things over to Amy to get us started.
Thanks, Christabel. First question, what can we win?
So up to 3 winners will have the opportunity to win up to $650,000 each, as well as an opportunity to flight test their technology at no additional cost to the winners. Host systems should expect to be compatible with many types of outgoing to the payload and incoming from the payload interfacing options across a broad range of commercial flight test vehicle types, such as suborbital, orbital, or planetary landers.
Next question, am I eligible if I've already received government funding for similar work?
So if you or your employer is receiving government funding for a project to specifically develop a flight-ready universal payload interface system, then you or your employer may not be eligible for the award. If you're an employee of a government contractor, you should be eligible to participate in this challenge as long as your entity does not currently have government funding for similar projects to develop a universal payload interface system. You may not be eligible for an award if similar projects to develop a universal payload interface system are in progress and government funded in part or wholly. And in addition, the US government may have intellectual property rights in your solution if your solution was made under a government contract, grant, or cooperative agreement. So under such conditions, you may not be eligible for an award. If your company does not have funding for work that meets the specific description, you should be eligible to continue your participation. But please do contact us at questions@nasatechleap.org if you have additional questions regarding your specific situation.
Next question, I see that this is meant for US citizens and permanent residents. Is there any other way an international entity can apply?
As you can see on the rules, in order to be eligible, individuals must be US citizens or permanent residents of the US and be 18 years of age and older. Organizations that apply must be an entity incorporated in and maintaining a primary place of business in the US. Foreign citizens may participate, but only if they are one of the options listed on the page, which are employees of an otherwise eligible US entity who also reside in the US, full-time students at an otherwise eligible US university or college who reside in the US, or owners of less than 50% of the interest in an otherwise eligible US entity who reside in the US.
What happens to my intellectual property?
Good question. So while responses to things like technology title and technology description may be published on the websites for UPIC or NASA, the ownership and use of your intellectual property arising from this competition remains with you. So NASA may choose to negotiate for a right to use license for technology developed as a result of this competition, but the IP will still remain with you.
Next question. Do we need to account for the flight test in our budget as part of the $650,000 award, or will flight tests be funded additionally by NASA after NASA chooses the flight vehicle?
The winners will be awarded up to $650,000 in prizes, and the prize funds can be used however the winners see fit. The flight test does not need to be accounted for in the budget because NASA intends to provide an opportunity to flight test at no additional cost to the winners. If there are costs that you might incur that you need to consider in terms of your flight test, you're welcome to include that. And for winners, budgets and everything will be discussed throughout the process.
Could you please show us where the guidelines and evaluation criteria are once more?
Oh, yes. So for the technical guidelines, you'll go to Application Process from the menu and select Technical Guidelines. As I mentioned, they'll have key objectives, minimum requirements, and then a summary about the key phases of the competition. And then for the evaluation criteria, go to Scoring Process, and you'll see a list there for the scoring rubric, and then the criteria for each of the system builds, the performance incentive phase, as well as the information on how we ensure a level playing field through our normalization.
Next question. What are the categories of payloads that we should design for and the flight companies we should consider? Can you clarify the expectations for the deliverable hardware/software for this design challenge? Is it acceptable to create an engineering grade proof of concept as long as there is a clear path to a fully space qualified device? Could you share more about the minimum required capability to survive relevant flight environments of target vehicles?
Yes, very good questions. So it is up to the challenge participant to define the scope and target vehicles of their UPIC system. An ideal UPIC system would have a wide breadth of application across multiple flight vehicles in a variety of regimes, from suborbital to orbital and beyond. For an idea of what kind of payloads, vehicles, and flight flight opportunities works with, you can refer to the Flight Opportunities website. I'll add some links to the chat for everyone, include the flight summaries page, the technology portfolio page, there's an IDIQ4 solicitation, and a couple other pages that I think will be helpful as reference points for everyone. This challenge is trying to solve a need for interface solutions that can address the use cases identified in the UPIC technical guidelines. And then in terms of system readiness phases, the intention is for participants to prepare flight-ready systems. And without knowing specifics of the proposed UPIC systems, it may be applicable for some aspects of the design to be proof of concept or notional, as long as the participant is preparing a flight-ready subset of hardware software in anticipation of the payload readiness phase of the challenge. We encourage you to research and discuss what that could entail with industry flight providers. In many cases, this is likely not a space qualification set of requirements and may instead be a less rigorous set of do no harm requirements.
Next question. Can NASA address the challenges associated with integrating diverse payloads, considering the different requirements they may have?
The challenges associated with integrating diverse payloads are the crux of the UPIC's challenge. It is a challenging and paradigm-shaping issue for flight integration activities. So this challenge is seeking innovative solutions that address the flight interface ambiguity.
What proportion of the payloads are biological, what physical sciences, and what devices like satellites or other electrical devices?
And it's up to the challenge participants to target a variety of payloads that are typically integrated with flight vehicles. Challenge is not targeting a specific list of payloads, but rather the spectrum of payloads that are flown in academia, government, and industry. As general guidance, challenge participants could target payloads in the 1,4U volumetric range, but this does not need to be the case, and individual UPIC solutions might vary in their payload and flight vehicle use cases. Challenge participants are encouraged to look at the Flight Opportunities Technology portfolio for an idea of the size, weight, and power requirements of payloads typically flown on suborbital and orbital launches. And participants should not consider this list exclusive, nor base their solution on the needs of specific prior payload flights. Participants should also note that this list of payloads likely does not represent the requirements of hosted orbital payloads. Again, I'll make sure all these links are in the chat, and we'll also add them on the FAQs on the website, and we can also email them to you if you'd like.
Next question. What happens at completion of the project post-successful flight? Do we help find other users of the system? Does Flight Opportunities sell referrals? Does Flight Opportunities hold the technology for others to use? How do we make it useful to other flyers?
The post-challenge activities will largely depend on the solutions that are brought forth as part of the challenge. There are many different paths that this could take, and NASA is excited to work with the participants and the broader community to take advantage of the outcomes of this competition and seek opportunities for future impact. Potential options for follow-on activities might include commercial products, new standards, open source opportunities, etc.
Next question. Is the universal payload interface for just electrical data, or do you anticipate any other host vehicle to payload inputs, such as pressurized air, vacuum line, water, drainage, or cooling, for example, active thermal control system inputs? Might there be any other exceptional inputs, for example, shut down all but critical power usage via some other mechanism? I'm thinking about what the host vehicle might require do here.
Yes, so the technical guidelines provide a set of minimum capabilities. Anything beyond this minimum will be seen as an additional feature of a challenge participant's UPIC solution, and provided that the additional features are conveyed with rationale, will be viewed as favorable and differentiating from the competition.
Next question. There's a little bit of text in the diagram that says modular mounting. Do you have any sort of list of what those modules might be?
Yes, so modular mounting refers to an aspirational desire that the UPIC system developed will be able to mount to multiple flight vehicle mechanical interfaces with minimal engineering work required to adapt the interface.
Will software-only submissions be eligible for consideration, or is a hardware interface component required?
It's unlikely for a software-only solution to meet all of the minimum required capabilities of a UPIC solution, as outlined in the challenge technical guidelines.
Next question. Is there expected to be hardware verification components to the initial proposal?
Hardware verification is not a prerequisite for the initial proposal. If a participant has existing hardware or is planning near-term validation of hardware, that may be used to add credibility to any proposed UPIC solution.
Can Jet Propulsion Laboratory engineers participate with a university partner?
Employees and contractors of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory are not eligible to win an award. As stated, I think earlier, but also outlined in the rules, U.S. government employees may participate so long as they are not acting within the scope of their position. They rely on no facilities access, personnel, knowledge, or other resources that are available to them as a result of their employment, except for those resources made available to all other participants on an equal basis. And U.S. government employees participating as individuals or who submit applications on behalf of an otherwise eligible organization will be responsible for ensuring that their participation in the competition is permitted by the rules and regulations relevant to their position, and that they have obtained any authorization that may be required by virtue of their government position. Failure to do so may result in the disqualification of them individually or of the entity which they represent or in which they are involved.
Next question. Can you provide test vehicle ICDs?
Yes, so it is up to the challenge participant to define the scope and target vehicles of their UPIC system. An ideal UPIC system would have a wide breadth of application across multiple flight vehicles in a variety of regimes, suborbital to orbital and beyond. We encourage participants to reach out to commercial flight providers to learn more about their interfaces and how they might develop compatible systems.
Next question. What are the software needs? What do vehicles provide for data, and what are the experiment data needs? Is it a pass-through?
Flight vehicles have unique software interface requirements. It is up to the challenge participant to define the scope and target vehicles of their UPIC system and develop their solution accordingly. We encourage participants to reach out to commercial flight providers to learn more about their interfaces and how they might develop a compatible system.
Next question. What are the desired ConOps for how the UPI will be operated? How do they envision users setting up configuring the UPI for an experiment?
The utilization of each UPIC system or system of systems will depend on the target use cases, target flight vehicles, and target users. That said, the technical guidelines provide some guidance on ideal ConOps. For example, it would be ideal for the UPIC system to be available to payload developers prior to flight vehicle selection and/or interface definition. This enables payload developers to deliver flight-ready units to a variety of flight providers.
Next question. Is a single monolithic hardware set desired, or can it be functionally the same, modular swappable parts?
It's up to the applicant to propose a system that they feel best addresses the requirements and the objectives of this challenge. Please note that modularity and flexibility to meet diverse sets of requirements among vehicles is a minimum required capability.
Next question. What are the harshest environments that the UPI will operate in? Vibe, shock, radiation, etc.
Environments are determined by the flight vehicles involved, and it's up to the applicant to determine the vehicle scope and therefore the operating environments for their particular solution. We envision UPIC ideally being used up to and including environments such as Earth orbit, the Moon, and Mars. Each environment represents a unique set of challenges for UPIC systems.
Next question. Who is the end customer for this device? Is this intended for use on NASA flight opportunities, or is it a broader scope? How many of these units do you envision will be used beyond the scope of this challenge?
So while Flight Opportunities is sponsoring this challenge, our hope is that solutions to this challenge can find broad application. Our program endeavors to increase the pace of technologies getting to flight tests across the industry. The use of these solutions would ideally not be limited only to Flight Opportunities or NASA-supported flights.
Next question. Would the payloads be placed in the interior of spacecrafts, or could they be mounted on the exterior of spacecrafts?
Envision that the UPIC system could be applicable to external flight vehicle interfaces, in addition to the interior of the spacecraft. Some payloads require test environments outside the interior spacecraft. A UPIC system that only meets the requirements of interior spacecraft environments would likely be judged as too narrowly applicable.
Is there a power range guideline for converting power and regulating power from vehicle to payload?
The flight vehicles have unique power interface requirements. It's up to the challenge participant to define the scope and target vehicles of their UPIC system and develop their solution accordingly. We encourage participants to reach out to commercial flight providers to learn more about their interfaces and how they might develop compatible systems. Solutions that can address a wide range of likely payload requirements will be judged favorably.
Next question. Does the budget need to be for the full amount, or is the budget looking for the cost to develop the hardware without consideration of salary?
It's up to each proposer to determine an appropriate budget for their proposed solution. In addition, the budget does not need to correlate with the prize amounts available for this challenge. The inclusion of the budget in the proposal is to help determine if the proposed project plan and budget are reasonable.
Next question. For the submission, is there any particular TRL for our solution that you are expecting to see?
For this one, there's no expected TRL for the UPIC solution. The participant must be able to build and demonstrate their system within the scope of the challenge timeline. And all of the timeline phases are on the website on that timeline page.
What can you build?
So please refer to the technical guidelines, and this has more information for you.
What content are you looking for in the video portion of the application?
Yes, so if you go to section B of the application, it talks about the video. It details our expectations. And I'll add that we don't expect the video to be professionally produced. Using an iPhone for the video is acceptable.
Just waiting for a few more questions to come in.
Thank you, Amy. And I did add some of those links in the chat. And again, we will be updating the FAQs on the website with some of this information to make sure you have it handy as you prepare your submissions. You can always email us as well at questions@nasatechleap.org. Also, I'll add, even if you're not sure if you're going to apply, please do just go ahead and register and create that account so that if you do decide later, you are able to access the application.
Can you say what the different phases are expected to see?
Yes. So the phases are outlined on a couple pages, but the timeline is a great place to start. It has some information on timing and some specifics on each phase. You can also see details for each of the system builds round 1 and round 2, underscoring process. So that'll have some information there. And then technical guidelines, as we showed earlier, has some summary information, as well as the about page has some information as well. So if you do still have questions, let us know, and we can help.
We have a few more questions coming in. One moment. Will you post this Q&A?
Yes, this webinar is being recorded. It will be shared on News and Updates. If you go to the menu and click on News and Updates, here is where we will provide information on upcoming webinars as well as recordings and any other updates relevant to the competition. So it'll be posted here. We'll also post it in forums. When you log into the platform and go to the forums page, it'll be there. And we'll also email it to registrants of the competition.
Should the interface we are building provide communication with the ground for the payload, or is it focused on a data relay between the payload and launch vehicle?
Communication between payload and vehicle is a minimum required capability. So communication between the payload and ground would be seen as a beneficial additional capability. Thank you everyone so much for your questions. We do have some time, so if there are more, please don't hesitate to add them to the Q&A tab. And again, to help ensure fairness, if you have anything that's very specific to your solution or to your eligibility, please do email us at questions@nasatechleap.org.
Can you talk through what the teams will be looking for during the check-ins for the different phases?
Give me one moment. Yes, the check-ins will be focused on understanding progress towards being ready for an on-site visit for both the System Build Round 1 and System Build Round 2. So again, please refer to those specific pages for additional information. And I'll add the check-ins are typically done through Zoom or through Teams.
When does the payload need to be ready for pre-testing to fly?
So even if you can go to the timeline page, you can refer to the challenge timeline for an idea of challenge milestones. That will give you a good idea, a good sense of when to expect to be ready for each of those different phases. So pre-testing to fly would fall into activities during the performance incentive phase.
Next question. With the variety of flight opportunity vehicles, do you envision a single interface that covers all of these vehicles single-handedly, or do you envision there would be a family of standardized interfaces?
So a universal interface that enables multiple flight tests across multiple vehicles is desired. So a family of standardized interfaces falls into a system of systems approach and is well within the expected proposed solutions.
A few more coming in. Is there any preference for the design to be provided as open source IP?
There is no firm preference for the design to be provided as open source IP. There is a desire for the UPIC solution to be broadly accessible, and implementable by innovators who need it the most. It is up to the challenge participants to convey how their UPIC system would be implemented.
Next question. Can you share some examples on how we prove that $250,000 liability insurance?
Yes, so there is guidance on the $250,000 liability insurance on the insurance guidelines page. I think if you click on application, we'll share that link. Actually, I'll put it in the chat as well. That outlines
Three more questions coming in. One moment.
and I'll add for that proof of insurance at the time of submission. You won't need to attach anything, but you will need to confirm. And then if you move on to later stages of the competition, we'll need to provide this.
One moment.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for such great questions. It is our hope to get to as many questions as we can during our time today. Again, if you do have more, please don't hesitate to reach out and email us. While preparing more answers to these questions, I will also note that as you work on your submission, we do recommend using Google Chrome as your browser. We find that the platform works best on Chrome. If you do run into any technical issues as you register and apply, again, please don't hesitate to email us at questions@nasa.techleap.org. And a couple other reminders. Again, the registration deadline is Thursday, February 1 at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Registration is required in order to participate. And then the submission deadline follows on Thursday, February 22nd at 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time. We are going to have another Q&A webinar for registrants on Thursday, February 8th at 4:00 p.m. Eastern Time. If other questions come up and you want to hear from us, that is another opportunity.
We have a question that came in. Are the notional flight vehicles and proposed interface solutions required as part of the TechLeap proposal? Would covering feasible hardware and and software designs and an approach to specializing configuring to the target test flight vehicle under the challenge be viewed favorably under the proposal evaluation criteria?
The examples of flight vehicles and payloads that Flight Opportunities work with are provided as a guide for participants to help target users of their UPIC proposed solution. The examples are not exhaustive, and the flight demonstration portion of this challenge may not be from the provided examples. Details of how a hardware and software solution will be tailored and specialized for known interfaces would be viewed favorably, as it would also add credibility that the proposed solution could be readied during the performance incentive phase of the challenge.
Next question. Not sure if this was asked, but is this challenge geared more toward industry leading the proposal, or are universities welcome to lead? Are there any special allowances for minority serving institutions? For example, would proposals involving students design courses, credit courses be viewed favorably, or is education training not a factor being considered?
Great question. So any type of eligible entity is welcome to be the lead organization for this challenge. Entity type, as well as education or training, are not factors within the evaluation criteria. Please refer to the eligibility guidelines and the rules and review the scoring criteria. And if you need assistance with a specific scenario, please don't hesitate to email us.
One moment. Could you elaborate with real-world examples on the specific problems faced in the current payload integration process?
Yes, so the technical guidelines provides use cases that participants may use to guide development of their UPIC solution. They're examples of real-world situations where a UPIC solution would be beneficial. Keep in mind that innovators may need to fly payloads on more than one type of flight vehicle, and so UPIC solutions should target as wide a range of interface requirements as feasible for the proposed system.
Next question. Is there a place that Flight Opportunities has payload user guides from different providers?
So Flight Opportunities does not have a repository of payload user guides. We encourage challenge participants to reach out directly to industry flight providers for more information about their vehicles. We're very close to getting all of these questions answered today. We do have time for a few more, so if you have questions, do enter them into the Q&A tab.
Are you only looking for universal payload devices, or are you open to advancing manufacturing devices that would integrate with these universal systems?
The UPIC solutions must accomplish the minimum required capabilities as outlined in the technical guidelines.
One moment.
Again, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and for your patience. We work to get them answered for you. And again, if you did not hear a response to one of your questions yet today, please do email us questions@nasatechleap.org. And again, we do encourage everyone to review all of the pages on the website as much as possible. There is a wealth of information there available to every visitor to the website to help prepare you for your submission.
A few minutes. Can this be used for drop testing at NASA Glenn Zero Gravity Research Facility?
So the challenge is not limited to flight tests on a specific subset of flight providers. It's up to the challenge participants to define the scope and target vehicles of their UPIC system. An ideal UPIC system would have a wide breadth of application across multiple commercial flight vehicles in a variety of regimes, from suborbital to orbital and beyond. Applicability beyond the scope may be seen favorably, and should the participant provide rationale for this capability. Thank you, everyone. We have time for one more question, but we got through most of them during our session today. 2 more questions that we can answer. So the next one will be, will interfaces provided by launch providers be listed or disclosed, such as power levels, types of data interfaces, etc. So this challenge is not limited to flight tests on a specific subset of flight providers. Again, it is up to the challenge participants to define the scope and target vehicles of the UPIC system. And we do hope that the ideal UPIC system would have a wide breadth of application across multiple flight vehicles in a variety of regimes. Last question I'll read. Can parts of the proposed solution be IP of other businesses who are willing to partner with the applicant? So yes, each application should reflect the anticipated ownership, use, and licensing of any intellectual property. And I think at this point, we'll go ahead and close the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for participating and joining us today. Again, please do remember the deadline is February 1 at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to register in order for you to be able to submit an application. The next webinar will be February 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and details will be sent to registrants of the competition. And then Thursday, February 22nd at 5 p.m. Eastern Time is the submission deadline. We are very excited to learn more about your proposed solutions. I'll go ahead and hand things over to Joe and the NASA team for any additional closing remarks.
Thanks, Christabel. Not many things to add here. Just thank you, everyone, for participating. And I believe the next webinar, Christabel, correct me if I'm wrong, will be in February for a Q&A session. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, February 8th.
Excellent.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and have very happy holidays.